So, good afternoon. My name is Lou Banks, and I am founder of Rising Vibe. And this is our very first Zoomcast. We've made it up. I don't think there are Zoomcastings existing anywhere else, but we're going to start podcasting later in the year. But we thought, actually, let's get amongst it straight away and try something new. We might even start a new trend. We might take over from podcasting. Zoomcasting might be the way forward. And the series is called Another Bloody Tangent. And the reason it's called that, two reasons. Business and leadership are full of different lines of thoughts and actions, as am I. I rarely stick to a script. And I'm sure during every single one of these we'll go off. We've got a slight script agenda, but we're just going to go with the conversation, which is why it's called that. Rising Vibe are culture consultants. And we are all about helping our clients create culture and embed culture that has emotion at the forefront. And you rarely see emotion and business in the same sentence as a rule. And our sub-brand, Calling Out the Men, is all about providing emotional support for men in business, because there is little, if you're lucky, of any of that around. And if you, as a simple exercise to prove the point, if you need it proved, if you Google support for men in business and support for women in business, the same stuff comes up. When you Google support for men in business, what you'll get is a big list of how men should be supporting women in business. And I am all about true gender balance, and the emotional stuff is not balanced. It's not equal. So that is what Calling Out the Men is about, which is why I'm very excited that our first one, I've got three lovely fellas here with me today. So we've got Ian Dinwiddy, who is the founder of Inspiring Dads. I'm pointing, not that you'll know where I'm pointing, it might not look the same as you're watching this. James Millar, who is the editor of workingdads.co.uk, and Hanson Lee, who is the founder of Daddy Life. So this is very much focused on being working dads. And one of the things that we've really noticed with our clients is this comes up consistently, that actually, what about us? We're also juggling stuff. It's all about working mums. And a lot of the mums, part-time working at home. A lot of the dads that I work with actually would rather be at home with the kids. That also comes up quite a lot of the time. So what we know is there's a big agenda under Calling Out the Men, because obviously a lot of our clients aren't dads. But this comes up consistently, which is why the fact that you three who are in this field are happy to talk to us today about what it is that you do and why you're passionate about it is very exciting for me. So what I'd love you to do, each of you, whoever wants to go first, is just give us a bit of insight into what your business is about, why you're in it, why you're passionate about it. And of course, we have to talk about Covid-19. There's no getting away from it. How that is also impacting you right now as a working dad, as a human being, and also in terms of the work that you do.
Right. Well, I'll go first since nobody else did.
Thanks, James. Everyone's being very polite there.
Well, I don't know. I thought you sounded like Cilla Blackmore when you said you had three lovely fellas there. We've gone back to like blind date.
Yeah, tell me a bit about yourself and where you're from.
Laura fellas. So yeah, working that. Well, I started. I wrote a couple of books about gender. One called The Gender Agenda, and another called Dads Don't Babysit, which kind of one led on from the other. And Working Dads was set up about 18 months ago, which was a spin out from Working Mums, because precisely as you say, there's a lot of stuff for working mums and less for working dads. It's essentially a recruitment site, but it's also got an editorial side as well, which is where I come in. I edit the editorial side. And I thought we always say it's for men for whom the 9 to 5 isn't working. So it's men who want to work flexibly or take more parental leave or work part-time, but basically want to achieve a better work-life balance. I'm aware there's some interesting discussions about the phrase work-life balance at the moment. A lot of people get a bit fed up with it, but we can maybe come on to that later. So yeah, and we feature case studies, best practice, news, anything that might be of interest to men who want to change up their work-life balance, what I would call for the better.
Yeah. And so for you right now, as a dad in this current situation, how's that working out?
It's all right, I would say. I'm very lucky, I think, is my main feeling. I've got two kids. One is 9 and one's 12. And a 12-year-old the school's been amazing in sending work back So she's just cracking on every day, which is really good. The 9-year-old needs a bit of, obviously, a lot more oversight, but he's currently got the right attitudes. Obviously, we've got Easter holidays around the corner, which is going to be a whole different kettle of fish, because then we won't have stuff to do, and that's going to be interesting. I think in some ways Easter might be coming in at the right time, because I think they're just beginning to get a bit fed up with 2 weeks of homeschooling is, getting a bit tiresome. But we'll find out. It might be better, actually. I've suggested that I think that the Department for Education and schools, we should just crack on through Easter and not have the Easter holidays, and take the 2 weeks either in May or in the summer holidays when kids are actually allowed outside. But I'm not sure about that. It might be good for everyone to have a little break, but I don't know what we're going to do with that break other than play Lego and watch TV.
It just sounds funny when you say Easter holidays, because no one's going to be doing anything, are they? It's just going to be the same again.
Yeah, it's not much of a holiday, but it's a break of sorts, I suppose. Who knows? This is all uncharted territory, isn't it? Let's face it. So I can make the case that it's a good thing or a bad thing that we've got Easter holidays, and I'll come back to me in a couple of weeks and I'll tell you which one was wrong. Okay,
I see what you're looking like after Easter holidays. Ian, what about you? Same question. So why are you involved in this stuff? What Inspiring Dads is about, and how you're managing at the moment as a dad in this time.
Yeah, in terms of Inspiring Dads itself, it's about helping stressed dads to balance work and fatherhood. That's the kind of core mission. And from a personal point of view, it kind of started from 2010 when my daughter was born. And I went to 4 days a week. I was working as a management consultant, which can be associated with very long hours and working away from home. But I had an amazing business that I worked for, amazing boss, line manager, and I was able to flex this 4 days a week. So I had a transition, and then I stopped work altogether. And I became a full-time stay-at-home dad for initially 9 months. Then I did a couple of days in nursery, some freelance work. And so for all of the last 10 years, I've been really used to flexing my time and making choices that a lot of dads don't really have. And I wanted, but a lot of dads do want to be more involved. They want to be a present father. GQ magazine, they do an annual State of Man survey, and I think it was 66% of men said the number one priority, the number one thing they wanted was to be a present father. So it's high up on the agenda, but not everyone gets the opportunity. I wanted to help guys to understand what it took to kind of realize their true ambitions of being a great dad and having a great career and being able to balance those. So a lot of what I do is working one-to-one, presentations, workshops, that sort of thing. I write for both James and Hanson. Really enjoy doing that and kind of exploring ideas about what it takes to do things in a different way, in a way that many dads historically haven't been able to do and perhaps haven't wanted to. I think we'll come on to it later, I'm sure, about the sort of generational shift in expectations about how parenting, how fatherhood, what it looks like, what it could look like. And obviously with COVID-19, we're seeing an enormous experiment in very different for different people, depending on how many children you have and what you have. And it's an enormous experiment in exploring the opportunities and what works and what doesn't work in terms of getting better work-life balance or work-life integration, or whatever word is the thing that we're most likely to use sort of long term. I still think balance is as useful a shorthand as anything. Me personally, my son had a cough. It got louder. We didn't think he could go to school. I had a hard stop. My wife's been working from home. She had a laptop couriered to her from her work because that suddenly stopped. And so we're on day 18 of kind of self-isolation. We're out of self-isolation. I think I've left the house twice in 18 days. I'm incredibly grateful that my 10-year-old and my 7-year-old are quite academically orientated. They like a lot of things, but they're also quite good. But I've been working early mornings and Saturdays and Sundays to kind of spread it out. And I'm same as sort of what James is saying really resonates with me. I'm not quite sure what Easter holidays look like, except if we don't do something academically, we're probably not going to be able to fill up the day very easily. Quite frankly, there's only so much garden cricket you can play. And I know I'm really lucky because I've got a nice, we've got a nice big garden. We're really close to the woods. And I feel, and it's one of the things that I think it's really important to recognise is sometimes is to be grateful for what you do have. I think that's one of the real challenges at the moment for all of us, is to recognise where things are good for you, and hang on to those for dear life, I think.
Yeah, definitely. And Hanson, what about you? Same question. Tell us about daddy life.
Yeah,
and your life as a daddy.
Will do. So Daddy Life was set up just over 3 years ago now. And Daddy Life is a platform for modern day fatherhood and a community of just over 150,000, mainly millennial dads. And the reason it got set up, to be honest, it very much chimes in with what you were saying about calling out the men, which was, when I became a dad for the first time, I knew that I wanted to be a much more present, a much more active father than what I had growing up. And to build on what Ian was saying before, and yourself, that when you Google resources, and I don't just mean sort of content, blogs, but just wider resources and thinking, everything pointed to mum. And actually, even a lot of the books, obviously not James's, but a lot of the books out there, in my day, were sort of telling dads just how to be better for mum, not necessarily recognising dads as growing beyond the secondary parent. And I think Ian's absolutely right that, we are and are going through now this incredible generational shift. And there just felt like there was a place to just start to talk to dads as dads. Whether that's about work, I mean, we cover quite a lot about work, but we also just cover a lot about life. So whether that's about things to do, or whether that's about health or education, or just what it means to be a modern day dad as part of really modern day thriving family. And I think for me, that's almost the big nirvana in this, which is, this isn't necessarily about just looking at dads, or in the same way, it shouldn't just be about looking at mums. I think it is all pointing, hopefully, to what modern day thriving family is all about. But in terms of work, so I think work is a very huge part of our lives. It's something we hear a lot about through the community. We had done our own research. We partnered with Deloitte last year on a piece of research called The Millennial Dad at Work, which was more focused on sort of 24 to 40 year old dads, or first wave, second wave millennial, to really just start to take a bit of a look under the bonnet, if you like. We hear a lot about this sense of dads wanting a different way of working. I love what James was saying there around kind of going beyond the 9 to 5. I think a lot of it is attributable to just the sort of role that dads want to have, really, as being parents. We found through our research last year, and also the year before through the Dad Index, that actually almost 90% of everyone we surveyed, so we surveyed just over 2,000 for Millennial Dad at Work, just wanted and called themselves very proudly out to be a more active day-to-day parent. But actually, when we look at some of their experiences at work, whether that's about flexible working, whether that's about management relationships, whether that's about sometimes colleague relationships, there is a huge level of tension there still to be solved. And so something that we've started to do is start to put the right sort of solutions in place. So, one of them is actually working with these two fine other gentlemen on a pilot last year called Dad Connect, which was just all about how we can bring dads who have kind of been there and done it. There are not a lot of Jameses and Ians out there, to be quite honest with you, but I think their wealth of experience and their empathy and their understanding of how to kind of get and coach and mentor dads going through perhaps their own times of strife, or just needing a bit of a voice to lean on, is absolutely there. So, Dad Connect is something we ran really successfully with sort of RBS, Deloitte and a few others last year. We're looking to scale that out across this year, having these two gents, of course, being involved in that. But I think there's just a huge wave, and there's still a huge amount to do when it comes to that balance. And I think if anything, COVID-19 is like the ultimate test of that balance, because it just isn't a balance at the moment at all. It's a kind of sense of trying to fit multiple things into one day. And my sort of glass half full side says, actually, if we're capturing the best of what's happening right now, whether that's about new ideas, new innovation, things of getting things done in a way that just wouldn't otherwise be possible. I've seen various different cultures that have done things, even little silly things, like sometimes like, whose cat's that, where people just send around a PDF literally of whose cat's that. And I guess that the organizations that I'm seeing really leading the way in this so far are ones that can just challenge themselves on how they keep their cultures alive in this time. And that includes families and absolutely what it means to be modern day family. From personal experience, if I'm being honest, because I'm separated from my child's partner, my child's mother, I should say, it's very much about trying to kind of find the balance between home education and homeschooling. So he's only 5, and sort of cracking on with work. and invariably kind of trying to fit everything in at the moment, which I think some days is easier said than done at the moment, for sure. And I can't wait until we get back outside again. I'll be totally honest. That'll be a great day for me.
Yeah, I bet it will. So the generational shift stuff that you've referenced, and culture, I guess I'm curious, and I'm assuming, Ian, you're in organisations coaching dads. Yeah, so I'm assuming as well you'll be coaching dads from a variety of generations.
More to do with the relatively new end. So my particular niche is around new dads, so return to work, paternity. But they tend to on a private basis, tend to attract men whose kids are in the sort of first sort of between 0 and 5 years. So a lot of it is around purpose. A lot of it is around reflecting on, okay, we've had the kids, now how are we planning the rest of our lives? What do I want to do? It's a lot around purpose. So tends to be younger children. So there's a lot of practicality stuff, certainly amongst the brand new dads. And then slightly more about sort of purpose, vision, direction for men who have kids who are a little bit younger than mine. So maybe 3 and 4, 5 and 6, that kind of age.
So is it more about, and because genuinely I don't know, when you talk, is it more about the age of the children or the age of the father?
It's more about the age of the children.
Okay.
I think the transition from sort of lad to dad affects men generally aren't that well, I think, emotionally prepared for that transition. I was really, really lucky, but I think a lot of men, it's a couple of weeks off, it's straight back into work. It's maybe sole breadwinner potentially, or long term it might be sole breadwinner. So there's a lot of stress and pressure around work, providing, being there, hours, almost redoubling your efforts to be able to provide the kind of the vision that you have, but also you know talking about that, you know, it does come up in conversation about being the dad that you don't remember growing up. You know, it's what Hanson said, and it's true. I was lucky. I feel very lucky. My dad had a car phone in his car, and he used to drive around. And on Wednesday afternoons, when I was playing sport, some strange place in Somerset, on top of a hill somewhere, on rugby, he would turn up because he'd arranged his schedule. That was sort of late 80s, and that was pretty unusual. So I didn't have that, but men do. You know, men I work with do reference that sense of being different from what they experience themselves.
Yeah.
Do you know, I just build on that, on what Ian was saying, because I think it's men in terms of opening up emotionally, and I think as a men's emotional language at work does tend to be very, very different. And I'd say just opening up as a whole, just finding the right ways of being vulnerable is not necessarily something that comes that naturally to across generations, really, of men. I think that's part of the problem as to why I think a lot of this is still relatively hidden, because it's not the sort of thing that is necessarily popular to talk about, you know, in the boardroom, or is necessarily that clear on the specific problems within that, if you like. So I think it is definitely a wider cultural conversation.
Yeah, and I think it will change as we're talking about the age of the kids. It's because a lot of people of our generation, you know, experienced this when we became parents for the first time. And hang on, something's a bit weird here. And now I'm slightly ahead of these two guys, I think, in that my daughter's now about to become a teenager. And I think you will find a lot of men going into a new phase. At the moment, it is a lot of men who have become parents going, what the hell is this? How do I deal with it? And that is the big generational change. But as their kids grow up and change and their needs change, how the dads react to that, you know, they're then going to go into the teenage years going, hang on, what was my experience of being a teenager, and how do I want to do it differently? Where, you know, what can I learn from those early years when I wanted to do that differently? And this is an ongoing process, I think, as you know, this new generation of dads, as their kids get older, things will sort of change and flex a bit, and you know, the emotions involved will be different from having babies to having teenagers, obviously.
Yeah. So this wasn't on our pre-reading for this, but I just as you were talking, so my husband's 50 this year, I'm 50 next year. So, and our kids, we've got a 19-year-old and a nearly 12-year-old. And Ben in 2013 was in a very stressful job. He wasn't enjoying it, so he gave it up. I said, give it up and do something different. What happened was he ended up being the primary carer. It worked for us. He supported me with the business and in my career. Now I think he's in that stage of going, because Charlie's at uni and Martha's at senior school, and that senior school step, more independence, he's kind of going, so purpose and direction for men is so important, right? What's my purpose and direction right now, because it's shifted. And he's got a very tight, so this is a metaphor, and I'm thinking about his culture within his friendship group, and I'm thinking about then in business, what you've experienced. His friends, he's got a big group of friends, and they've been friends since they were at senior school, since they were 11. So they've been close for a very long time. And I still hear the banter. I still hear the piss taking about, so what is it you do all day then, mate? And Ben going along with it, and Ben laughing with them about it. And I know it kills him. I know it hurts him. But that, to have that conversation, and I'm sure, by the way, on a one-to-one, he might have more vulnerable, to your point, Hanson, more vulnerable conversations about what it feels like in right now with the kids not really needing us in the same way they did. But I wonder metaphorically how much of that also shows up in business, where there is a dad who's going, actually, I want to go part-time, or I want to be flexible, or let me leave early on a Wednesday and a Friday so I can pick the kids up from school. And the ones that are not comfortable with it, and often not comfortable because it triggers something in them, a bit of shame in them maybe that they're not doing that, or they've never done that, or whatever it might be, we don't know. But it just got me thinking, I wonder how much of that I overhear is actually going on in business, and how that impacts some of the men that you are working with and engaging
with. There's a lot in that. I mean, part of the research we did last year was all about what specific tensions are experienced, and then where in the organisation are they experienced. And there was a tremendous amount actually on colleagues. So I think it was almost 50% of everyone that said that they experienced regular tensions, whether that's about, leaving work early, as you were saying, or around what they're doing today, or around their parental role. It was 40 or 45%, I think was the number. And if you just think that's really high. And I think it adds to this other hidden issue, which is around mental health, actually, which is, I think I'm all for a bit of banter here and there, a few side jokes, whatever. I think the way it becomes more serious, and where it becomes this kind of culturally systemic problem of really affecting, what is still unfortunately not well known as I think it is, suicide is like the biggest killer of men under 40 in this country. And I'm not putting all of that obviously on this, but I think certainly work is a huge part of our lives, and there is a massive hidden, unfortunately, mental health implication of all of this. And I think one thing we need to start to do, and it's why it's sites like Working Dads, it's part of the Working Dads Hub that we have as well, just focusing on more and more people who are finding ways to break through, and focusing on that best practice and those best case scenarios as much as possible is so important, because without that, we're not going to create the new normal. And one of my big hopes is that we are, the combination of all of our work really is kind of contributing to a new normal as quickly as possible.
Okay.
Yeah, I mean, banter has a lot to answer for, frankly. It's not like feminism, if you like. You have to be very careful about drawing comparisons. But in a way, it is. One bit of banter is not a big deal, right? But huge little bits of banter all over the place build up into a much bigger picture. Exactly. And that prevents men from behaving in certain ways, or channels them into certain behaviours. I mean, one of the things that always strikes me is. We've done surveys on it, and the ONS does surveys on it. I think it's about 4 or 5% of men have flexible working arrangements. Now, that's not true. Loads more men have flexible working arrangements, but they have informal flexible working arrangements, because something about filling in the form and saying, I want to work flexibly, that's what women do. That's what they do when they come back from maternity leave, right? That's what they do. Whereas what men do is, and they don't do it anymore down the golf club, but that's where it used to happen. They have a word with the boss and say, do you mind if I leave at 3 o'clock on a Friday to go and pick up the kids? The boss goes, yeah, that's fine, you get your work done, whatever. That's still a flexible working arrangement, but it's an informal flexible working arrangement. And lots of men have that, but they won't do it formally, because then that's when the banter kicks in. And yeah, I mean, there's plenty of examples on Working Dads of case studies of men who've done this, and they all, to a man, will say that, yeah, somebody said to them, you're under your wife's thumb, you're a part-timer, even if, they're just working differently. That stuff happens all the time. And as I say, one little incident doesn't feel like much, but it builds up into a much bigger, much more powerful force. And, you have to look at the figures to see how powerful that force is, how it drives men's behaviour.
Yeah, and just before you respond, Ian, I'm thinking about exactly that. When I've said to Ben afterwards, have you said how hurtful that is? It's like, don't be ridiculous. To actually own that step into that vulnerable space and say that actually is really hurtful is so disclosing and so exposing that, and there's so much shame associated with saying you're hurting and you're not coping with something, that it just limits that, doesn't it? Yeah.
And you will be shut out because of it. That's the thing. I mean, in my first book, in the Gender Agenda, I spoke about this. You know, it's all about the different ways that genders are treated. And I talk about sitting in the pub with the guys after a game of football, and one of them said, "I've noticed I've started to throw like a girl." And I said, "You've got a daughter. How can you say I've started to throw like a girl? You think of what that means to her. It means she can't throw. You're limiting her expectations." And of course, the invitation to the pub sort of slowly dried up after that. You get excluded if you challenge it. And, you know, nobody wants to be that guy.
No, absolutely. Ian, what about you?
Yeah, I was going to say, I mean, following on from what James said about the informal flexibility, I did a couple of workshops at Shell down in a chemical refinery, at Forley, down in Southampton. And I think there was a room where there were 16 men, and all 16 of them, we did a little bit of voting on a little bit of software, and all 16 of them were accessing inflexible working. Sorry, we're actually accessing informal flexible working. Let's get that right. And none of them had formalized structures. And I think one of the issues with that is that the effect it has on women. And I think it has on female partners in heterosexual relationships, because where a man is feeling unable or unable to access flexible working if they want to on a structured basis, it means that for their partner to return to work or to do the type of work that they might want to, they have to be flexible in order to access that work. And so that ad hoc flexibility is lovely for those kind of, you know, what you might call the signature events. So harvest festival, end of term stuff, school sports day, where it's a nod and a wink. Is all right, I'll work from home. I'll be out. You know, I won't be contactable for a couple of hours. That's great in terms of relationship with kids, perhaps. But if you want to go beyond just being a hero for your kids and to building a sort of more equitable world and equitable relationship with your partner, you need to understand that actually, if you're only ever picking and choosing when you're doing it on an ad hoc basis, you're not creating family structures that allow sort of flexibility and allow sort of more better decisions and better and more choices for your partner. That really matters. I think if we're thinking about sort of role modeling of what it looks like, is that informality is great, but it's not really solving a problem around, certainly not solving a problem around women being able to return to the workplace. And it relates to men do this, women do this. You know, flexible working is something that women do when they come back from, it's offered to women when they come back from paternity leave. Maternity leave, it's not something men do. And it's because not enough men are showing that. So Hanson published an interview that I did back in December, and it was with a partner of a law firm. His name's Dominic. And initially he was going to be Tom, the secret lawyer, because he was working 4 days a week, but he hadn't officially announced that. So his fourth day, he would do a lot of client work very early in the morning. He's an employment lawyer. And this story's out there, so there's no confidentiality, because we changed his name. So Hanson published this article. I did the interview, we got round to writing up. Hanson published this article. And over the course of the weekend after it being published, Dominic came back and he said, actually, I've talked to HR, I've talked internally, I've thought about my own values. I want to come public with this. I want to say, I'm a law partner and I work 4 days a week, and this is how I do it. But initially, it was very much about that being a secret. And he was like, well, why is it a secret? And he started to sort of assess his own values. Why haven't some of my clients know? Some of them don't. Why haven't I told everyone? And so I think it was really powerful to be able to tell that story, and then to be able to change the narrative about what it meant.
Yeah.
Do you know, it's funny, that piece still gets comments to this day, actually, on the piece, unless they're just wider about literally about the disclosure of it and the kind of bravery around it. But you're right, and hopefully he's doing his bit to create the new normal.
I mean, role modeling, anything done covertly, even if it's helpful, is unhelpful, right? Because especially when it comes to role modeling, we you know, to be able to step out there and say, I have applied for formal flexible working and I'm all right with it because actually I need it. I'm not doing it under the radar. And the reason a lot of people are doing it under the radar is because there's some shame associated with, but that's what women, that kind of, you know, we've got to be out there, which is actually calling out the men. It fits beautifully into Rising Vibe. It's not, we do some separate programs, but it fits into Rising Vibe because it's about creating an environment where there's emotional support for men in business. But the reason we are separating it is because we want to be overt. We want to go, there's nothing out there for them. We're being deliberately provocative because we want it to be a thing. And there's that thing about, I don't want to be deliberately provocative because actually I'm uncomfortable with it. I think that isn't going to help, especially when it comes to role modeling this stuff.
Do you know, it's so funny to pick on what Ian was saying. So Ian was, I think he was our first ever guest editor of the Dads at Work Hub. We had another one recently from John Adams, who runs Dad Blog, and he actually interviewed a range of different male leaders and dads at various different FTSE 100 companies, and actually just asked, you know, are you taking flexible working? You know, is it something you literally role model? Is it something you talk to your teams about? And how many of them are actually doing it? And it was a really fascinating process he went through. Just one, to even get companies to even disclose it to him, and then actually the wider impact of that across their teams is genuinely fascinating. Just how hidden that is, and so how even within people who you would say are doing it, the actual chance to share it and literally role model it as opposed to just doing it and not role modeling it, which is a massive difference.
Massive difference, yeah. So I just wanted to pick up on, so kind of coming back really to the COVID frame at this moment. So we know, based on research we've done as part of Calling Out the Men, and this won't be a surprise to you guys, that work is the second biggest trigger for male depression to relationship breakdown. So if you think now about the current situation, you have got some men and some men that I'm working with who are being laid off, being made redundant. And there's a lot of shame associated with that. Even in this climate, there's shame associated with it because it's that male thing, and I'm the provider and I'm that. Then working at home, some people don't have kids, some people don't have a wife, but some of them have a girlfriend, or they might be living on their own, but in a house, in very extreme, intense situations where you might still be trying to do your job from afar. And what I also know is when you are remote, social pain kicks in, the isolation. I don't know what's going on. Am I being excluded? Am I safe? So that is all heightened. You've got your partner, if you've got one in the house. You might have children, you know, young children you're having to. So relationship breakdown and work, the two biggest triggers for male depression. And we don't know how long this crisis is going to go on for. As you said, Hanson, you know, suicide, mental health for men, it's a big thing. And what advice, based on what it is that you guys do, would you give to someone? By the way, it's my husband just walking past there in there, trying to sneak by, but he didn't do it very well. What advice would you give to two men out there right now who are experiencing just some of the stuff we talked about in this current situation?
Well, I've written a piece for working dads, which is full of 10 top tips for how to cope with this situation. I mean, the key one, and I think we'd all agree, and it comes back time and time again, is good enough is good enough. Do not beat yourself up. I mean, it's parenting, it's work, it's life, basically. Good enough is good enough, right? You know, you don't have to be the best teacher and the best dad and the best partner. You just have to be the best you can, or something vaguely adequate, I would suggest, in the current situation is acceptable. But you've also got to turn it on its head. I mean, men who are more involved with family life will have better mental health. You know, so the idea that being cooped up with your family is somehow going to affect your mental health badly, and of course for some people it will. You know, it doesn't have to be that way, particularly if you take this opportunity to get more involved in family life if you haven't been doing that before. So I think, yeah, I'm very wary of this whole, you know, this is an opportunity, because then it does become something else on your head, thinking, oh, it's an opportunity and I'm not taking it. But yeah, I mean, it comes back to this sort of, you know, fundamentally good enough is good enough. And there are opportunities within this that may present themselves. and perhaps just being alert to those opportunities as they come along.
So I guess you would say, in a nutshell, for you, James, it's about catching yourself and going, hang on a minute, am I doing my best here? Good enough is good enough. You know, almost like a little bit of a mantra in a way would be to notice when you are not feeling that, when you're feeling the pressure, and to just check in around that.
It's incredibly powerful. I mean, Hanson mentioned the Dad Connect. Again, there's no confidentiality issues here, but the person that I mentored wasn't aware of this idea of good enough is good enough. And that kind of solved, I'm not going to say I solved everything or that solved everything. Clearly, there's no silver bullet for everybody's concerns, mental health, however you want to phrase it. But just knowing that you don't have to beat yourself up and try and be the best. And that is hard in this COVID-19 thing. Yesterday, I left a Facebook group. I joined a Facebook group with tips and ideas for entertaining the kids. And people were posting, somebody had chalked every brick on their house to turn it into a rainbow. Somebody had made a cake which just looked like it comes straight out of a shop. And
I feel stressed.
Well, exactly. It wasn't actually giving me any tips to help the kids. It was just making me feel like I wasn't doing as well as everybody else. And you go, well, hang on, that's not true. And I know that's not true. But I was able to say, you know, right, this isn't helping me. I'm just going to leave this group. And I think, you know, social media comes into a lot around this COVID-19 stuff. It's very, when you are cooped up, there is a temptation to spend a lot of time online, and you have to be very wary of how you do that. But yeah, I think it's just awareness, being present, being aware. I mean, like I say, it's not really for me to tell, or any of us tell other people how to do this, because none of us have done it before. But I think it's good to say, you know, it's just good enough is good enough. Just do your best. Yeah.
Comparison is the devil, right? Comparison is the devil, 100%. Yeah. What about you, Ian Hanson? What in terms of that, you know, the biggest trigger points for depression? What are you thinking?
Well, I think some of the things that serve men, some of the sort of archetypal sort of masculine skills are quite useful to tap into. Things like stoicism and getting your head down and putting in the time and focusing on one task at a time. I think that can, you know, that can be very comforting, but also there's a sense of working out what it is you need to do in terms of communication. I don't think men's emotional language, we talked about it earlier, men's emotional language isn't as well developed as women generally, and tapping into that and finding who do you need to speak to, who you can help to process this. So, you know, so as we talked about before, so I work one-on-one with men within a private and corporate setting. I had a call earlier this week, and it wasn't goal setting, it wasn't focus. It was just someone who, in his words, I don't have skin in the game, so he can talk through his situation. He went out for a walk around the park, and we spoke on the phone for an hour, and we just kind of talked about what was going on for him. And for him, it wasn't about setting any goals. It was just someone else someone to talk to ultimately. And I think there's going to be a lot of pressure put on families who are both physically cooped up, but also emotionally cooped up, because sometimes I think, you know, you've got these sort of traits around stoicism, which are great, but men's kind of traditional sort of releases of going out and, you know, slide tackling someone on a Sunday morning when it was a bit late, and, you know, and going out and having a couple of beers and putting the world to rights, those kind of slightly cliched sort of male things that are releases from work and from family, they aren't there. So men are going to have to work a lot harder, I think, in terms of communication and for checking in, and for talking to each other, talking to their kids in a different way, talking to their partner in a different way, so we can avoid some of these spikes in domestic violence, which, you know, I've got a friend who's a police officer, happens at Christmas and it's happening now. It's a sad reality. Relationship breakdown, these kind of things are real issues that men, I think, have to work a lot harder than they would normally do. We can't run away from these. I think in terms of tips, I guess it's almost setting aside time, is saying, okay, and being in the moment, whatever moment it needs to be, whether it's a homeschool moment, or it's in the garden, or it's, you know, going for a walk, be in the moment, that, you know, giving everything to that moment, whether that's having a conversation with your spouse about what needs to be done around the home that hasn't yet been done, where the stress points are, understanding where those pressure points are, setting aside time to talk about it, to process it, working out who to talk to. I've done a lot more in my own Facebook group. I know a lot of Facebook groups are doing a lot more in terms of communication, and that's sort of taking that kind of virtual meetup is taking the place of more sort of face-to-face. But I think men, we do have to work a lot harder. We need to understand where our pressure points are, and we can't run away from this. But talking it through and making sure everyone's happy. What's everyone's needs? What are my children's needs? What are my needs in terms of work, emotional support? What does my wife need? And respecting those. Because I think once you open up those lines of communication, then it hopefully will make things easier. For some relationships, there will be collateral damage without doubt from this kind of emotional and physical kind of confinement, I think. But for a lot of people, including the guy I was working with on Tuesday, he's a lot closer emotionally to his partner than he was previously. And he said, this is one of the really good things that this is, and there's a beautiful quote I sometimes use, and I'll let Hanson jump in a second. So it's something I found just before I got married 12 years ago or so, and it's a quote from a French author. I won't embarrass myself by trying to pronounce his name correctly, but what he said was, love does not consist of gazing at one another, but looking together in the same direction.
Yeah. And I think as a woman, our role in this is to support and encourage that, but to just keep showing up and give it time. So just to say something like, this is weird, this is tough, this is different, we're going to need to keep talking about how it's feeling, I'm ready when you are. And then go back and say, look, that thing about talking about this, I'm finding it difficult, let me tell you what's going on for me, I'd love you to share it. I know it's not necessarily the thing that you do, it's not your way, but I think it might help us. I'm ready when you are. Like, that conversation we had in there, because what tends to happen with the people that I'm working with, in business, not at home, but they'll talk about stuff at home, is we give up too quick. We go, well, I've tried that, it hasn't worked. You've got to keep showing up. Because especially with men communicating, your word centers and emotional centers in your brain are not connected in the same way as women's facts. So it's actually that it's not so easy for you to do that. Some men say to me, my wife calls me an emotional mute. It's really unhelpful. It's just not a natural way to engage. So we have a massive part in this to keep showing up if we're comfortable with it. By the way, there's women who are not comfortable with it. I also know that to be true. That's when it's a real challenge. But not to expect you guys, where it's not your natural way, to step into that vulnerable space, just to crack on and do it. We need to be there with you, alongside you, because I think that sometimes is forgotten, actually.
I'll be interested to see if Hanson agrees with that, because I don't.
Oh, good.
No, hang on. No, I think it's not for a woman to say, I'm ready when you are. It's for a team, a pair, a partnership to say, I need to deal with this now. Get here, step up. The stories I'm hearing of men who are just holding up in their office or in their bedroom and cracking on with work and pretending that somehow they don't have a responsibility around homeschooling or cooking or domestic work, the mental load and all that sort of stuff, is outrageous. And there's no excuse for it. I get that this is hard for everyone. I mean, I suppose that's the core of it. This is hard for everyone. And it's not okay for one half of the partnership or one gender to say, oh, well, I do work, that's my thing, and I'm not engaging. I just think, no, I think, and I don't want to put this on women, and it's very difficult how you phrase it, but I think women should demand as much as they want or need from their partners. I don't think it's okay to let men just say, oh, somehow this is difficult for me. This is difficult for everyone.
So I guess, James, this is really interesting. This is really great, because this is like in the moment. So my relationship, I'm really bloody demanding. I have no challenge to say, this isn't working for me. I guess what I'm talking about is the emotional bit, not necessarily the doing stuff. So I guess what I'm thinking about, and I've clearly got my frame on, which is my relationship, which is my husband doesn't have a lot of great feelings about himself, if that makes sense. And I think this will help us, actually, because I think this has balanced it for us, interestingly. And I suppose where I'm coming from is where you're coming from in terms of the environment and having to do stuff as a partnership, I totally agree with that. I think what I'm coming from about the mental health area of this was...
No, but so am I, to be fair. I mean, it's not just about the practical stuff, it's about that emotional stuff, and there's emotional work that both partners need to do.
Yeah, I agree. I think some, and I'm talking clearly from my position where I am, I know that doesn't work, I guess is what I'm saying. I know when I show up like that with him, it doesn't work. It takes it to a very, very unhelpful place. And I suppose everyone's going to be different, right? Everyone's going to be different. I know there are some women out there who are not, absolutely not. Some of my friends walk on eggshells, wouldn't say anything. I'm the other end of the spectrum, which is also unhelpful. So I think it's about getting the balance, isn't it? It's getting the balance right. Hanson, what's your view? Because it's good, because James said he thought you might disagree too. I like it.
Do you know, I love it when James Miller just starts really going off on the rant. It's great. No, it's great.
You read my blog
You took this long.
It's do you know what I'd say? I think it's it's really interesting because the last few weeks before we all had to stay indoors, one of the most enlightening moments I've had is that I went to a conference called Pregnant and Screwed. It was Jolie's conference, and I kind of got basically what James is saying, but like the very extreme, in some cases, side of it. But actually, I learned so much on that. It really opened my eyes up to a whole new perspective of thinking. It was one of the best things I've done probably the last year. And I guess what I realized from that was that, in some sense, every family situation is different. Right? There'll be things that work for one family that just doesn't work. So there'll be traditional, breadwinner roles, etc., for one person versus another, and they'll work, and that's perfectly happy. That's them as a thriving family. That's cool. But I do kind of tend to agree with James, to be honest, that actually, as a population of people, it's interesting. I was on a Deloitte podcast, and the debate was, "Do working dads have it too easy?" ? And I guess you're kind of naturally, from my daddy life perspective, inclined to say, well, of course they don't. Actually, they've got it harder than ever. But actually, when you sort of take a step back and you realise that where we're currently at is probably still too much overall celebrating the really little things, like, dad changes nappy, let's all have a huge house party. Whereas actually, no, that should just be the expectation. But I think with all these things, it does take time to get to that new normal. So it's great that actually we're having that kind of provocation, that debate now. And I think families will find what is the right thing for them. But I think, as an overall thing, there is a massive gap, I guess, for men to step up in. But it does also come with a sense of what other parts and our partners are kind of also willing to unload as well. And it does need both to tango. And I kind of, I'm not going to attempt to do Ian's quote again, but he's absolutely right. I think beyond love, just any sort of relationship isn't necessarily about looking to each other's eyes. It is about facing the right direction. And I think that's a great principle to keep in mind.
And I guess it's interesting for me because I'm probably the man in this situation, which is probably why what I'm saying here is because I'm the one who's been building the business since 2013 with his support. He's been there with the kids. Ben's a great cook. My dinners have been cooked. That stuff's carrying on as normal. Yeah. So if I'm doing yoga with Ben in the morning, Martha and I then doing Joe Wicks together, and then she's got her, he is doing that role you just talked about. He's always been a brilliantly hands-on dad. So it's very interesting. And I guess this could be a whole nother Zoomcast, that I'm just reflecting on the fact that I am, and I think there are a lot of women out there like me. I have a couple of friends who are in the same situation. It's me more that should be challenged right now to step into that, doing more of the stuff at home, which I'm gradually starting to do. But that feels like a real stretch for me because it's just not the way that our unit is set up and the way that we operate.
Well, I guess it's whatever works for you. So I guess as long as there's clear lines of communication, has Ben, sorry, I don't want to turn this into a therapy session.
It's like calling back in. It's like calling
back in. Absolutely, why not?
But I guess that's the point, you see. And I suppose going right back to about checking in, full loop, which is brilliant, that I'm not sure it is. And I need him to share that. Does that make sense?
Totally.
Checking in, when I push too hard, I don't get anywhere. When I do that, look, this is what then I will, just one evening after we watch something on Netflix as we're going to bed, there'll be a comment, and I just have to accept that's what I'm going to get for them and go with it. So I think it's almost like it's different. The whole thing about they get celebrated for changing nappy. my husband probably changed more nappies than me, if that
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, exactly. Yeah, I know I did as well. I mean, do you know what? I've just got a great idea. I think we should, if James, Ian, and myself we can keep this going. We can just call it the Three Wise Men Zoomcast. We can just have different people in the chair every week.
Yeah, I think we could definitely keep this going. Actually, maybe I could get Ben to join me at one point. We get your wives in, and then maybe the children, and
Let's do it all. Let's just create a massive conversation.
Yeah. Well, we could talk for hours. But just to finish off, I've got 2 questions that I always want to cover at the end of these. The first one is, so how can dads and employers, just from each of you, learn more about what you do? So when people watch this, they know where to go and find you guys.
Go online, basically. Workingdads.co.uk is the website. You can say I posted a blog that if it was Monday or Tuesday. Who knows what day of the week it is?
Exactly. It's like Christmas.
It was very good. It was very, very good.
I posted my top 10 tips for dads to step up. But there's loads of resources there. That's the best place. Go and buy my book. Go and buy Dads Don't Babysit. Got my commission came through this week. Yeah. So that's me 20 quid up. Boom. I got a whole £20. If only I could go and spend it. I could spend my 20.
You can spend it online. You can spend it
all
online.
those sales. So please go and buy my book. Either that one or the Gender Agenda. Look us Twitter. Obviously, we're at Working Dads. We're on Facebook, or you'll find me. I'm at Political Yeti on Twitter.
Okay, fabulous. Hanson?
So same online, daddylife.com. You can find us on Facebook at Daddy Life, Insta on Daddy Life, Twitter. It's the other way around on Twitter. I couldn't get Daddy Life. Still in negotiation with the chap there. So it's Life Daddy over there. But yeah, we've got dedicated Dads at Work Hub. Otherwise, come over for kind of content, or just get in touch with me, dad@daddylife.com, for a few of the initiatives that we run specifically for dads and working dads.
Brilliant. Ian?
Yeah, and for me, it's inspiringdads.co.uk. That's where all my stuff is. I'm also Ian Dinwiddy on LinkedIn and on Twitter. There is another Ian Dinwiddy, but he doesn't look like me, so that's
no way.
Kind of giveaway. Yeah, I know, exactly.
Outrageous.
One other. It's an uncommon name. There's one other. He plays a lot of squash in Shropshire.
Oh,
I know that.
you're just stalking him, Ian.
Well, got to see who's he's abusing my intellectual property. But no, so inspiringdads.co.uk, and if you're also, if you happen to be on Working Dads or on Daddy Life, then I turn up in a couple of different places on there, and a little bit on Twitter. But that's where I am.
And actually, I don't know, some of you guys, I think James, you might have seen it when we saw you at Mad World, but we've got on our website, it's the Rising Vibrational Scale, which is it's the backbone framework of our brands, and it helps people have a conversation around emotion. So it helps people label in a very disassociated way how they're feeling. And what we recognize, I mean, it works brilliantly with men and women, but especially men. We've had men say to us, I had no idea there were these many words to describe emotion. And you don't even have to say the emotion. You can say I'm around a number 17 rather than saying I feel resentful. So that is on our website, rising-5.com, on the Rising Vibrational Scale page. You can download it. So and loads of people are using that at the moment. Actually, we're doing some work with the NHS just to check in every morning and every night around where they're at, to bring that into their awareness, which actually helps to settle you a little bit just by acknowledging your emotions. So that's our thing that might help. And finally, if life could take you on any tangent, where would you go? Like, there's no, I mean, right now I'd just go for a pint, or I'd like to go to the gym, or I'd just like to go to the park. But if you could take you on any tangent, where would you go?
Can I take this on a tangent first of all, and ask Hanson the most important COVID-19 question? What are you doing about the beard, Hanson? You're going to go? I don't know. I'm thinking about going full druid until we're released again. Are you
Joe, are
you going to just let it go?
I just had that as a great tangent.
Yeah,
I actually just trimmed mine this morning because never.
Looks nice.
Thanks, man.
Yeah, so you've got the three examples.
I'm very flattered that you choose.
Ian's actually getting up, making the effort to say.
Absolutely.
Hanson's looking after us a bit. I'm just going to go. I'm letting it go at the moment. We'll see how it turns out.
Really? Because yours has it's got great shape. You wouldn't think it's not there at all.
If we're going to be in for 3 months, it could be pretty impressive by the end of it. So I don't know. I'm quite excited.
James, let it go till Christmas and go full Santa.
Yeah, well, who knows? Yeah, who knows when we're ever going to get released from COVID jail. And my other tangent would also relate to Hanson. I can't decide if he looks like a devil or like some sort of medieval.
I had that earlier.
Like those medieval pictures of a saint. He's got the circle just drawn around his head. So
it's like
I'm going with the saint. I think he's more of a saint than a devil. So
I thought it was a bull. Bull in the china shop.
Yeah, exactly. Well, actually, I saw Avengers Assemble again the other day, and someone said that I look like Loki again.
Yes.
Which I'll take.
So James is going full beard. That's his tangent. He's going full Santa. Maybe we'll see. What about Ian and Hanson? Where if you could go on any tangent, where would you go?
That's a good question. Well, when I look out the window here, I can usually see we sit underneath one of the stacks for Heathrow, so it would be a case of picking. And at the moment I can't see any planes, literally none. But it would be sitting here, picking the plane, looking up where it's going, and saying that's where we're going to go on the next trip. That would be a good tangent, I think.
Yeah.
Because at the moment, literally, I can't see anything.
Literally going nowhere.
Going nowhere at the moment. But it's usually 2 or 3 an hour. You can see at the moment.
Yeah, that's crazy, isn't it? Great for the global warming, though, right? That's every cloud. Yeah. Okay, so you'd be jumping on the next plane, heading off. What about you, Hanson?
Oh, fine. Which one? Yeah.
Mine is not a massive tangent actually, but it's sort of I didn't get a chance to unfortunately answer your question before about sort of learnings and how people are coping through COVID-19. But I'll bring one of those into this, if that's okay, because one of the things I've seen a lot from the Dad Love community over the last few days is, I think we mentioned this at the start, actually, maybe it was pre the call, about just gratitude. And one of the more encouraging, really quite lovely things actually about this time is just how much we're focusing on the people that really matter, and whether that's clap for the NHS, which like my whole street did last night, which I was really, really proud of, or it's just actually just thinking about people who are maybe in just less fortunate situations. Like I talked to a friend of mine who's a social worker, who deals a lot around children and families who where being together really isn't a good thing at all, and I think just being grateful, if we can all come out of this a bit more human and a bit more grateful, and if that can have an impact that's everlasting, for me that would be a wonderful thing.
Yeah. And you've mentioned work-life balance a few times. I have started referring to it as work-play balance, because actually life should encompass both. And I truly believe part of the new normal, and I'm hoping, will be that the perspective and the learning we're getting from this will bring more of that true work-play balance. Where people really will go, actually, there is genuinely, I love my career, I love my job, but there's genuinely more to life for me right now than that. I also think it will bring a lot more humanized leadership. People are seeing their bosses and their peers sat in their lounge, sometimes in their pajamas or a hoodie, with a dog barking and kids crying. It's, everybody is human. And I think it's brilliant that people are starting to see that now. And the other thing, and it kind of led on from what you were saying earlier, James, about comparison and coming out of a group and what are we focusing on. I was watching the TV with Martha, who's nearly 12, and they had NHS Nightingale on telly. So we're looking at exactly the same picture, and where we're focusing drives what we're thinking drives how we're feeling, right, in that moment. And she said, "Oh mum, look how many people are going to die." I said, actually, I was looking at it thinking, imagine how many people they're going to save. And if you think about that as a metaphor right now, she was thinking that she was focused on what might go wrong. She was having thoughts that made her feel anxious and fearful. I was focusing on what might go right. And therefore, I actually felt hopeful and optimistic. And I think that right now is what we're helping our clients with. How can you find relief from this? Because we can't change it. How can you find relief and therefore feel a bit better more often by just focusing on what might go right rather than what might go wrong? Easy to say, but it is, for me, one of the easiest ways to just feel a little bit of release from that low vibe emotion that we're all feeling, because there's a lot of stuff that might really go right from this, isn't there?
Absolutely.
So I think it's a brilliant idea, Hanson, for you to be the 3 wise men. What would that make me? All answer one. I might leave you to
the angel.
Oh, yeah, I like that. Yeah. The angel.
I was going to go straight for Jesus, but
so thank you so much. We could just carry on all afternoon. I mean, we should really. There's, you know, we're working from home.
Got kids to look after. Got to go make
Yeah,
lunch.
yeah,
Oh yeah, of course you have. Yeah, sorry, yeah, crack on.
Fuel starts at 2 o'clock, and I've got ironing to do, so no, I can't do it.
But thank you ever so much. You've been bloody brilliant. I've loved it, and we'll definitely do this again in a month. Let's do it once a month. See what's been going on, because things are changing day by day. Thanks very much, guys.
thanks all.
See you later.
See you later. Keep
Bye.
well.